Welcome in the kitchen. You're with Tom House, the legendary Tom House.
Legend in your own mind, right?
Definitely in mine, yeah. And me, Luke Collis. We'll get going here in about 30 seconds. Just wait for everybody to get in. Tom, how you doing today?
Real good. How about you?
I'm doing well. Did you work with any quarterbacks today?
Actually, the kid from Brazil,
Yeah.
who's going to end up going to UCLA as a walk-on,
Wow.
he actually threw the ball 62 yards yesterday. So his shoulder's healthy.
Yeah.
Now he's just got to go find someplace to get reps.
Awesome. That's great. He's kind of a big kid, huh?
Yeah, when he showed up, he was kind of I would call a muffin top, 6'4", 225, 230. Now he's 6'5" and about 210. He's actually got, you can see some definition, but he's a young 19-year-old. And one of these days we'll talk about it. There's different windows of trainability, and they're not necessarily ages, but where their biological age is in their chronological age. That's for another conversation.
Yeah. One more question about that. I can only assume all you've done is describe this kid when he first showed up, but I feel like it's pretty common amongst young quarterbacks. You kind of need to teach him how to go fast, right? Did he have an issue with going fast?
Yeah, everybody does. Even some of the pro guys, they don't quite understand GFF. The prevailing coaching philosophy is to always be under control. Don't rush yourself. Well, literally, the more you rush your body, but slow your mind down, the better you're going to be. You can't go too fast.
Right. And then that does lead us into this conversation about stack and track. Some of you, especially using the app, you know about stack and track. You've heard about it. Maybe the idea of it is a little bit vague, which it usually is. It's sometimes tough to wrap the mind around. But for quarterbacks who've built up all this momentum towards their target, they've had their torque retention, they've built up all this torque, they're driving towards their target, maybe they hitched into the throw. You have to stop all that momentum, and you can't just keep on rotating through it. And so that's what stack and track is. That's that redirection towards your target. That's how you get all that energy that you developed going towards your target. And now we get to hear from the man himself about torque retention, why it's so important, and then how to improve on it for yourself. So, Tom, in your own words, what is torque retention, and does it differ from baseball to football?
Luke, you set me up really well on this one. 80% of your velocity, whether you're a quarterback or a pitcher, comes from hip and shoulder separation, delayed shoulder rotation, or torque. That's rotational torque or angular torque. When your body is deciding to throw, you've got to make sure that your shoulders stop perpendicular to the target. And the second round of torque comes in with stack and track. And stack and track is when the shoulders stop being rotational and turn into being directional. And for some quarterbacks like yourself, you had great torque. You didn't have much shoulder and hip separation, but you hung on to it to the last possible second. And when you did square up, you used your upper body in that directional mode with your low back hyperextended, getting ready to flex, and you turned all that rotational energy into directional energy with your stack and track. So they go together. And in your mind's eye, and putting numbers to it, in a perfect world, 80% from rotational torque, 20% from directional torque. Put the two together and you have an NFL quarterback.
And does that differ from football to baseball? Is the philosophy still the same?
The movements are all the same. The time constraints are compressed. Remember, as a quarterback, if the ball's not out of your hand in 0.5 seconds, you're dead as a quarterback. Mm-hmm. A pitcher doesn't even get into foot strike until 1 second. So you've got in effect, and I'll just throw out the mean of the numbers, you've got to be able to get into foot strike in 0.17 seconds as a quarterback. And the ball has to be coming out of your hand 0.25 to 0.35 seconds later. And the combination of your angular torque and your linear torque, or direction and rotational torque, have to line up in that time frame.
That makes sense. That makes sense. You know, maybe you can't get into it too much, but are there any guys who are great examples of stack and track?
Probably the taller quarterbacks show it really well.
Mhm.
If you watch any of the big boys, who's the quarterback with the Chargers?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you
Perfect.
watch him, he really shows it well because he's 6'6".
Yeah.
Old Tom Brady film, you can always see it. It's that point in time when the shoulders are squaring up to where the receiver is going. Like if I'm your receiver and you're throwing right over the middle linebacker, your shoulders will be perfectly perpendicular to me.
Mhm.
Your low back is doing this. And then as your arm snaps forward, your torso is delivering that arm snap forward, and all your energy is redirected toward where you're throwing the ball, not the receiver, but to where the receiver is going.
You know, we were watching a little bit of my throwing session from last week, which it wasn't great for me, but we got through it. And so I do want to actually just share my screen and check.
Well, while you're setting the screen up, we can set this up. Luke, your arm really worked. Your biggest issue was you weren't too flexible in your core.
Right.
Now, if I had you when you were an 18 or a 19-year-old, we would have gotten you a lot more flexible, and your strong arm would have been accompanied with a whole lot of angular and linear torque, and you would have been able to throw the ball even better than you already did. You know, you had a cannon for an arm, but it would have been great to have a body support that great arm. Let's see what you do here.
All right. We're just gonna roll through it frame by frame.
Okay.
So
Okay, notice the weight transfer. Your weight transfer has completed. It's now coming up from feet to legs to hips to shoulders to arm.
and the
Yeah.
good news is the hips have gone and the shoulders are still towards the
Yeah.
target.
This is why you were able to really fling the ball. Now we're going to stop it as soon as right there. Now what it doesn't show really well, but you kind of see what your shirt is doing. Why is your shirt blousing out toward those kids that are playing soccer up front there?
Because momentum has stopped.
Yes, your upper body has stopped. Your low back has taken a hyperextended spine and flexed it, and your throwing forearm was laying back in external rotation. The shoulders were perpendicular to where you were throwing the ball, and it all snapped at the same time like a slingshot to deliver the ball in linear, not angular energy. If you had been rotating through a lot of quarterback coaches and a lot of kids have great arms, but in this point of the release point, their shoulders would already be aiming to the left, and if their eyes even stay straight, they would be over rotating because they didn't stack and track. So again, it's not a huge movement, especially with guys that are built like you. You have to look at a skinny quarterback or a tall, real tall quarterback to actually see it. It shows really well with a pitcher because they're way down the mound with a 6 to 7 foot stride.
Mhm.
But with a short stride like you had, this is actually picture perfect. Your release point, even now, how old are you now? 21, 22?
Thank you, Tom.
Your release point is still 8 to 12 inches in front of your landing leg foot. So it's like riding a bike. You may be the older version of yourself, but your mechanics are still very efficient.
Yeah, and I think everyone can see that the shoulders are still pointed towards the target at release point.
Yeah.
And that's relatively easy to see there.
And if we were looking from the front, your left arm and hand would be inside the width of your torso. If you didn't have stack and track, we would be able to see your whole arm outside your body when the football is leaving your hand, because you would be over rotating instead of redirecting.
And I mean, you mentioned, quarterbacks and some coaches, and not everybody has this knowledge about stack and track. I remember, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I remember I went to a quarterback coach when I was around the time when I first started seeing you, Tom. And this guy was renowned, he's on ESPN and stuff. And I'm not naming names, but literally teaching that you're supposed to swing through like this and keep your shoulders rotating.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that. Now, you and I talk a little bit off camera. That's what our eyes think they see. Remember, the human eye can really only see about 32 frames per second accurately. When you get into an activity like throwing, it is 1/200th of a second, 1/100th of a second. Your eyes really can't register, so they lie to you. So everybody taught, it's like when pitching coaches talked about front side, everybody thought you pulled your front arm toward your hip when you threw the ball. Well, it doesn't. Everything has to stop when the ball is leaving your hand. What you just explained right there, we now know because of technology like mustard, that there is a space, a time, and a distance where when the shoulders have squared up to the target, you have to redirect rotational energy into directional energy with that stack and track. For a quarterback, it may only be 2.5 inches like you. It might be 4.5 inches like Brady, but it does, even though it's a small distance, it does have to redirect.
I mean, it's just totally right. And I can't stress it enough. I've come across so many coaches, so many athletes who still believe in that, and you'll probably come across it at home. Just they teach shoulder to shoulder, and a lot of kids feel like, oh yeah, I should have more power like that. You're losing everything. Everything is going away.
And I would encourage everybody to look at momentum and translating energy with vectors. If you're spinning when you should be directing, you are losing energy in the rotation. And again, it's so subtle, it's so quick to the naked eye with regular cell phone or regular video, but in fast pitch or fast speed three-dimensional motion analysis, you can't escape it. It's right there.
I want to show you all something else that's a little bit funny. Is I think back earlier in my career, my stack and track was maybe worse than what you guys saw. Let's take a look. I mean, this is stuff that's here. Let's just play it.
Oh yeah, your front side was completely gone there. But see, you got away with it because you're built like a stump with a really good arm. So you made up for with strength what other people couldn't do with their torso. So you've always had a great arm, but look at your back foot. That's an indicator of where all your vectors, where all your energy was going.
I think we have a dig route here. You know what? There's a couple issues with this dig route that I noticed, and we were talking about it last week. So, first of all, I'm probably aligned not to where I'm throwing. Like, look at my shoulders. My shoulders are aligned to where he's at right now, not where I'm throwing the ball.
And what do you know? Do you throw to the target, or do you throw the target open?
First off, you need to throw the target open. And then secondly, your shoulders are always going to be aligned at release point to where you're throwing.
If you do it right.
Yeah.
But remember, good athletes like yourself adapt. They figure out a way to adapt to accommodate what is necessary to complete a pass. And probably one of the reasons you didn't play in the NFL long term was because of these subtle little things that when they compared you and your talent arm-wise to someone that had good mechanics with the arm, they basically followed that kid rather than you.
I totally agree. And I think that some of these inefficiencies, they might not show themselves in a simple throwing workout, but when you're playing at the top levels and you're in a game and there's other things going on, you know, even if someone is 1 times out of 100 better than you are, those show up, you know,
Yes.
when it's third down or whatever, and you only have 3 downs a drive, basically
Yeah.
in football, it shows
But
up.
with all that, you know, it's really hard to play at the elite level. It's really hard to play consistency for a long term at the elite level. But believe it or not, it is teachable. And with the technology we have, like mustard and like other things, when it comes to the drills to train, we can make sure that your mechanics are efficient. Now, you're still going to have to get functionally strong. There's other things you have to do to go with, but stack and track is very teachable now. But when I first saw you, when we first started talking about you and quarterbacks at that time, we didn't know what it was called. We had to identify it and actually look at it in a large sample. When I say large sample, more than 50 quarterbacks before we even knew what we were looking at. Does
Yeah,
that make sense? So it's
that
nobody's
makes
fault.
total sense.
It's nobody's fault that it was. It is your fault if you don't take advantage of the new information and instruction and improve your mechanics accordingly.
The other thing I'll say is I see a lot of video of folks throwing from a static position, you know, they want to show mechanics so they don't take a drop back and they just throw. And I will say that drop backs reveal pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And
And you see,
going back here.
yeah. See,
Yeah.
that brings my, how old were you when this film was taken? Do you remember?
I had to be, you know, maybe 22 or whatever.
Yeah, I wish I could have got
21.
hands-on with you when you were 17 or 18, because there's a big league arm here,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
your body lets you down a little bit, and you
Yeah.
still were productive. I mean, you still got it done, but that's where your adapting and your strength overcame a mechanical inefficiency.
Yep.
That's why we're here
That's
talking
exactly
right
right.
now, so the kids that are following us don't go through that stuff.
Let's take a look at a video and a corresponding question that we got from our Discord.
Okay, perfect.
So this user, first of all, I'm glad that they started taking dropbacks with their video, because I think that that's really, really important. A lot of times.
It's very revealing.
Yep, exactly. So we're going to take a look at this drop, and their question specifically was about stride length, but I really want to see the stack and track first and our thoughts on stack and track, and then we can get into stride length a little bit.
All right, let's see what he does here. We're just going to let it play. All right, I'll tell you what, it's not that bad. It could be improved a little bit, but if you want to run it back, now his shoulders have over-rotated. I don't know if we have his report card, but his stack and track over-rotated by probably about 15 degrees, which is in inches, about 4 inches. But that 4 inches, for every 1 inch of inappropriate over-rotation, it'll cost you 2 inches of release point. And instead of being a pass that is centered on the receiver, it'll be outside the width of the receiver's body, which becomes a 50-50 ball. Now, he does a lot of things right, but here's a kid who is hyper flexible. I'm going to guess he's 15 or 16 years old. He's got a really good arm, but watch what happens when I think, what do you guys call this, a hitch or a double hitch? On his second hitch, his left shoulder and his hip go together too much.
Yeah.
And he stops it with his front side hand. Notice his hand will stop inside the width of his body. But hold that right there. His opposite and equal loop, he's actually running from the football. This is something you didn't do because you were so strong. That if you look at the angle in his right elbow to forearm and his left elbow to forearm, they should be perfectly equal. The foot, as he's stepping forward, as he's stepping forward, he's leaving the football and counting on arm strength to catch it up to his stack and track. But because his arm is a little late and his hip and shoulder rotation is a little early, he doesn't have the stack and track that he should have by about 4 inches. Do we have a report card on this kid?
I do not.
Okay.
That's on me.
Ultimately, we'll do quarterbacks just like we do pitchers. He's got a really easy fix. He's got to bring the football with him when he breaks his hands. He's got to make sure when he actually does get his front foot down, that the energy coming up, when it gets to the hips and shoulders, he hangs on the torque as long as he can. When the shoulders give, they got to stop at 90 degrees to where he's throwing. I'm guessing he's throwing an out, maybe a post pattern. What? Because he's not throwing right up the middle.
So that's, yeah, and actually that's part of my concern is I would be really curious where he's throwing to, because I'm a big fan of getting that left shoulder pointed to your target to make sure you've got proper hip and shoulder separation.
That's a trick. That's a trick you figured out that helps you hang on to your torque. If you can look at the ankle eye on his back foot, his ankle eye tells me he should be throwing right up the gut, but his eyes tell me he's throwing to the left. He's throwing right over to where the left, one of the receivers on the left side. So it should all be lined up for him to have a good sack and track. Everything should be lined up when his shoulders are perpendicular to where his target is.
And then,
but he's got a good arm. Somebody, I don't know whether he's one of us or is hurt, but he does a lot of things right. And again, he's just a puppy. The football weighs almost as much as he does.
Now, I don't know if this has something to do with stack and track. I know a lot of times when we talk about stack and track, we talk about at this frame, that back being in hyperextension.
Yeah, now he doesn't have much hyper. See how upright he is?
Yeah.
He's got a little bend in his low back, but the reason it isn't a big bend is because he's rotating through. You can't have your low back doing this when it's rotating.
Got it.
Did that make sense? Tell me what I just said so I didn't screw that
up. You can't be rotating and have like the bend in your back.
Yes, you have to have that hyperextension in your low back, and you can't be rotational with it. It's a directional move.
Yeah. Okay. And then maybe it's with long striders, you see it a little bit more. I'm not sure actually. I really don't know.
His base, let's okay, do you mind if I share something with you here?
Can I ask you what it relates to first? So like
go ahead.
His upper body to me is maybe leaned like a tad forward than I see most football players. Like most football players, you're exactly upright. With baseball, you see them down there a little bit more. Does that have anything to do with stride?
The reason he's so upright is his base is really broad. Can you take him back to the start when he does his initial movement toward the target? So see how broad his base is right there?
That's pretty wide. You're right.
This is a Tom Brady issue right here. He's already so wide that his upper body is going to lean. He gets heady because he has to get heady to compensate for the width of his stride or the width of the base. Now, he only strides about one of his feet, but he's already spread out so far that he literally, all his energy is really wide when he lands, and he has to move his head to compensate for the energy being spread out instead of coming straight up in his kinematic sequence. Is that too much?
Not for me,
so,
but yeah.
What we would do if I had him, it was the same teach that we fiddled with Brady about when I first started working with Tom, is that we literally, he needs to narrow it up a little bit, keep the same timing into foot strike so that his head stays over his center of gravity between the balls of his feet, and he can sequence the movements perfectly.
That makes sense to me. How
So why isn't his t-shirt flopping out like yours did?
that momentum kind of
Yeah,
kept.
because his momentum going forward has already been shot because he's over rotated.
Yeah, you can see it. It doesn't flop out like it doesn't flop out until the ball's after
Yeah,
the
it,
ball's
it
released.
should look like he's got balloons underneath his t-shirt.
It should
But
flop
you'll
out
notice
right now.
around his belly, it puffs out a little bit. But where's his momentum going right now? It's all spinning to the left.
Yeah, yeah. So it's still going that way.
But if this kid is listening, or that he ever does listen to us evaluating his delivery, he does a lot of things right. His arm works. He's keeping his eyes level, even though he is a little heady.
Yeah.
Back foot is on the ground when the football leaves his hand. Front side is inside the width of his body, although it's outside the left knee, it is inside the width of his body. So even though he's over rotated, he doesn't have the arms pulling away from the football.
Mm-hmm.
I hope all that made sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. Now, one of his questions was, and I don't have video of both, he has different stride lengths on his 3-step and on his 5-step. That's what he was saying.
And why? How old is he? 15, 16? And do you think these quarterbacks understand why they have 2-step, 3-step, 5-step drops? Everybody thinks it's for the quarterback. It's for the timing of the receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And what'll happen, he'll complete his drop, and he'll look and he'll realize he's behind or he's too early. And that's where he starts adjusting with his stride length. Where if he's really in perfect sync with his receiver and he understands where the receiver is going to be and where he's supposed to throw the ball to get the receiver open, then basically his strides and his, what do you call them, in rhythm throw,
Yeah.
and those throws will automatically be chopped up equally so that the timing of release is fit to the timing of where the football is supposed to go.
You know what? I think I understand the question a little bit more. It's a 3-step and throw versus a 5-step and hitch. And he was saying
Yes.
The 5-step and hitch stride length was longer than the 3-step and throw.
Yes, and that's
Absolutely.
only natural.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what he needs to compute, put it in his brain, so it's like a body clock you can take with him anywhere. Once your front foot hits, ball's got to be out of your hand in 0.25 to 0.35 seconds. The footwork underneath that, it's better to be too quick than too late. You throw with your feet. So he's going to time his release point, foot to release point, by getting whatever footwork he's doing consistent in the back of his subconscious mind. So he doesn't have to think about 3-step, 5-step. It's going to be the length of the stride is going to be cut into the time he has to get rid of the football. Can you tell me what I just said?
The length of the stride that he has is in proportion to the routes and
Exactly.
yeah.
And the reason you were so accurate, the reason you were good at that is because what did you like to do more than anything? All you wanted to do was throw the football.
Just want to throw it.
Throw. Let's go throw. So
Yeah.
you had already established that clock was already in your mind. He right now is trying to figure out, and I'm sure he's growing and gaining weight. He probably won't have that timing down till he's 20 or 21 years old. It doesn't
Mhm.
stop him from trying to be perfect with it, but he has to continually try to match up the timing of the steps it needs to get his foot into strike, to get the football going where it's supposed to go. And that comes with literally his aging process, his functional strength, his repetitions, and his mechanical efficiency. They all have, and that's why there's no perfect quarterbacks when they're 15 or 16 years old. And we get spoiled because we look at the Mahomes, or we look at these number one draft choices, and they do so many things right. You have no idea how much practice time they put in.
Yeah. And the biggest advice that I can give for the question about 3-step and throw versus 5-step and hitch is the routes are designed and the play and the steps are designed for the timing to work out so that the ball is delivered on time. And
Yeah,
that's the end all be all. And I would say 100% of quarterbacks have been late and are mostly late on throws. And that's probably for their entire career. I don't know a single one who's early. And then sometimes you see it. I mean, even NFL guys you see so often, they're late on throws because it's hard. You have to make these reads and you have to get rid of the ball.
yeah, and they're taught to throw to an open receiver instead of throwing a receiver open. In my opinion, in my evaluation over the last 25 years, the quarterbacks that play on the elite level are able to throw a receiver open through those windows. When you have a camera on Drew Brees in a game, the defense looks like this. He throws the football,
Oh,
the
yeah.
defense opens up, the ball goes through the window, and there's no receiver there yet. Then all of a sudden he's right there.
Yep.
And that's why these elite guys take their receivers with them wherever they work out in the offseason. They take their 3 or 4 receivers with them. And the more they throw together, the more they understand that timing, the better they're going to be. So again, we're being hypercritical of this young man, but as a 15 or a 16-year-old quarterback, he does a lot of things right.
Yep. Totally agree. And then one more question. Do we start our break, I think hands break, at foot strike?
Let's do it this way. Yes, in a perfect world, you don't want to break your hands too soon and you don't want to break them too late. But where you break your hands has a lot to do with it too. I see a lot of quarterback coaches that teach pushing the ball away while you're going forward. I would strongly suggest putting the tip, when you're in practice throws, put the tip of the football on your chin and don't start to throw until your foot hits the ground. With some guys that are really early open guys, I'll actually have them, I'm demonstrating left-handed, have them put the football closer to the target than their back shoulder and rotate into it. That will keep their shoulder from opening up too soon. So take your hands, pretend like you're throwing in the good old days. Now move your hands towards your left shoulder. Now step and throw from there. You can't spin out.
Yeah, you have to rotate back.
Yeah, those are tricks, and you want to match up that upper body timing with your feet. And if I tell every quarterback I've ever worked with, basically GFF, quick feet equal quick release. If you're throwing a rock at a rabbit to eat, the quicker your feet are, the quicker the rock's going to come out of your hand. So don't ever try to be too slow. I would rather have you be too fast and adjust from there than too slow and never catch up.
Totally agree. And then, I mean, I feel like for most quarterbacks, maybe the hands start to break as you like stepping forward because you get that opposite and equal at foot strike. But you can't start rotating before that.
You've got to bring your hands with you in a linear progression. And that linear progression turns into a stack that what would be a rotation turns into a direction. And that's where your stack and track. The stack and track has to happen, even if it's only 1.5 inches, even if it's 5-6 inches. It has to square up and redirect all that rotational energy to directional energy.
Mm-hmm. Happy to take more questions. I'm always answering questions on Discord. Tom, I think that was a great summary of stack and track. Hopefully everybody out there got a lot out of it. If you have more questions, please ask in the Discord. I'm answering a few times a week. Happy to help. Happy to send video. If you are sending video, try to include the drop.
And look, make sure they understand we talk all the time too. Whenever we run into something that we have a question about that you can help me with or vice versa, we're always trying to help behind the scenes. So don't be shy.
Absolutely. Tom, thank you so much. That was awesome.
Give me a shout as soon as you're off. I need to talk to you about a couple things.
Sounds great.
Okay, look, thanks, buddy.
All right. Thanks, everybody.